Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Now, before I go any further, this is going to be a video on how to counter the absolute powerhouse that is Austrian line infantry, or just Austrian infantry in general. But before we go any further, I have a confession to make, and that is, this will come as something of a shock to you all, I am a complete boob. Because in the video on the Austrian infantry, I talked quite extensively about the special rule unreliable that the Grenzer have. Now, I put it across in the video that unreliable was every time you take damage, you need to take a morale test, not just for excess casualties. That, of course, is not the rule for unreliable. That is, I believe, wavering. I should probably check this out before I start the video, shouldn't I? It definitely is. I've just got my rulebook out in front of me, page 106. Wavering is, in fact, the one I was thinking of. So, Grenzer do not have wavering. Grenzer have unreliable. Now that is, if you roll equal to your strategy rating, then you don't move. Now, interestingly, it is written on more than once. So I'll read the whole thing out. Unreliable. Unreliable units don't move on a command roll equal to the commander's staff rating. Otherwise, they move exactly as other units. If unreliable units are included in a group order with other units, this means it's possible for other units to move whilst the unreliable elements remain staunchly immobile. So, that specifically does not say that it counts as a failed order. So, there's no risk to the brigade, apart from perhaps splitting them up, of including a Grenzer unit in a brigade order. So, I would say, actually, that does change my argument about them. I would suggest that you could put them on the front line. However, they do risk holding up all the units behind. So, whilst my main strategy of having them as the second line, I would maintain, is not as bad as I thought it was. So I just wanted to clear that up. I have pinned the comment that first mentioned this on the previous video, but I know not everyone sees the comments. But yes, so that was a huge mistake from me. Unreliable is no move on a roll equal to their strategy rating. It has almost no problem in defense whatsoever because you're not moving that much. But it does mean that when you're attacking, it makes it slightly, well, as the name suggests, less reliable, that you're going to be able to put all the troops in and get all the supports that you need. For that reason, I would say that if you are in a defensive position, I would actually recommend that you put the Grenzers out front. Now, because they've got that mixed skirmish special rule, it means that they can get the obscure target. They can be at -1 to hit. And it just means that the musketry from the opponents is going to be that little bit less effective. And that leads us in quite nicely into the core topic of this video, which is how to defeat Austrian infantry. Now, talking about the musketry, I would say that is probably one of the best ways. You'll have seen in my videos on the French, I talk about always be in march attack column. Attack column, not march attack. That's in attack column. So I say to the French, always be in attack column. I would suggest that against the Austrians, that's a possibility that you would actually form line. Now, the reason being, the Austrians are going to have more shots than you because they're going to be a large battalion. So they're going to have 4 shots back at you. You're only throwing 3 out at them if you're a standard size battalion, which most French units are. But there are some other ways that you can sway the battle to your favour. The first one is getting the first volley. This is not the 7 Years' War. We're not inviting our opponents to fire first. We're going to march up. One move, I would suggest that you only do it with one move. So you're in musket range, and then you're going to blast the enemy. Now, the reason for that is you can try and get that all-important 6. If you can disorder the enemy's hitting you back on 5s in their turn. If you've got deployed skirmishers, which you should have, there's no reason not to, then they're hitting you back on 6s. You're hitting them on 4s. Now, they are rolling extra dice to you, but they're hitting you on 6s. You're hitting them on 4s. So that, I would say, is the way I would deal with Austrian infantry. And this is if you're on the attack. Now, if you're an army that's particularly good at shooting, for argument's sake, you're using the British against an Austrian army, then I would 100% go for this rule. You get that 4th dice on your first volley. So actually, for the first round of firing, you are as effective as the Austrians. Not only as effective, but very, very easily more effective. And that's because Austrian units are large. 48 figures usually is what I use. And that means that they're twice the size of a British battalion. So you can get 2 British battalions in line firing at that 1 Austrian battalion in defence. So now you're chucking out 8 dice to the Austrian battalion's 4. Now, speaking of 8 dice, that's how much they roll in close combat. That's why I would try and avoid it as much as possible. Unless you're Russians, in which case you might have a chance, or if you are Guard. Now, if you are particularly French Guard, and you are in attack column, definitely go in and charge. You've got a 2+ save in that formation. I would not be too concerned about their 8 attack dice back at you. But normally, I would not expect a French battalion to beat an Austrian one in combat. Even if the Austrian one's already taken, say, a casualty, maybe even 2 casualties, they're attacking you with 8 dice, hitting you on 4s. You're saving them on a 3. So, you know, they might get 1 or 2 through. You're rolling 6 dice, hitting them on 3, so that's 4 hits, and they're picking off 2. So you're only doing 2 hits on them. If they're in a defensive position, they're going to be supported to at least 1 flank and the rear. So suddenly, you're looking to have a very bad time. So for that reason, I wouldn't charge them unless they are shaken or very close to shaken. If they've taken 3 casualties out of 4, then I'd charge in and maybe try and plink that last one off. But failing that, especially with their special rule for having an extra dice the first time they deliver point-blank range fire, which is effectively closing fire, then, yeah, I really would question whether you want to be charging into close combat. And that's another thing to remember as well, is that is a 1-use bonus. So if you've got a battalion that's a bit of a sacrificial one, then you can always throw those guys in first. So for instance, it might be something like a French line battalion you throw in, and then supporting them or just behind them, you've got throwing, which takes some Polish with tough fighter, or something like that. So I would recommend that if you are going to go into close combat, and really I would question whether you want to or not, then you want to try and soak up the Flint and Karscheich with a not so good unit, and then charge the better ones in later. I really cannot stress enough, though, I don't think that's a very good idea. Now, normally I would say the best thing to do against enemy infantry is threaten them with cavalry, make them form square, pound them with cannons, shoot them up with your volleys. Job's a good un. Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt, everyone gets to go home, break open the croissants. However, in this case, it doesn't really work with the Austrians, I'm afraid, and that's because they've got battalion mass. So even when you force them into square, and I'm doing air quotes there, they're not really in square. They can still move. Now, they move slower than they would normally, and that's important, but they can still move. So you can use your cavalry to slow down and maybe break up an enemy assault. So suddenly, if the enemy are advancing, then some units are moving slower than others, and you can maybe pick them off one at a time if your troops are positioned so they've got supports to the flank and rear. Because your units are so much smaller than the Austrian ones, there's a good opportunity to get those supports in as well, because you can gang up on those Austrian infantry units. And that's really the key. I mentioned it with the British earlier on, but you can do it with French as well, or perhaps Russians. You can just double up your units. So because they're such massive units, you get 2 units versus 1 of their infantry ones, and you're going to do twice as much damage, or maybe a third again as much firepower as they've got against you. Now, I should say this is not easy. Against a skilled Austrian general, it's very difficult to do. You'll have seen in the battle reports how much I struggled with General Andy's armies, and that was 2 reasons. 1, the Austrians are very strong, and 2, General Andy was a very good commander as well. So the things that you would normally use, cavalry particularly, not so useful against the Austrians. Just bear that in mind. Now, one of the other things I would say as well, particularly with the French, is use your command values. Now, French, they can buy strategy rating 9 generals. I very rarely do. 2 reasons. 1, there's not actually that many commanders that warrant strategy rating 9. Remember, Napoleon has a strategy rating of 9. So, are there that many commanders equal to Napoleon? I would argue probably not. Although, it's slightly different because it's strategy rating of, it's as good as Napoleon in your role. So, it's a difficult one to quantify, really. But I would say the reason that I wouldn't do that is because you're wasting points there. It's 50 points for a strategy rating 9 commander. Strategy rating 8 is half that, 25 points. You get +1 for being in column of attack. You get another +1 for the pas de charge special rule. So you're actually maxing out your strategy rating of 10 there. Having the extra one going up to 11, it doesn't matter because it's still capped at 10. So for that reason, I would only go with a strategy rating 8 general. That makes you strategy rating 10, which means that on average, an average dice roll on 2 dice is a 7. So on average, you're getting 3 moves out of that unit. So the first thing I would be looking at is, as I said, gang up on the enemy. That's great. Send off 1 battalion, send off 2 battalions if you can afford it, to get around the flank of the Austrians. Now, it's not necessarily very easy because their units are so wide, because there's so many of them. You really have to go out there. But if you can start rolling up the enemy's flank, then that can be incredibly strong. Because suddenly, alright, they've got 8 attack dice, but they have to halve that. So they're only putting 4 into the unit that's in the side. Of course, the other thing would be to use artillery as well. The French, obviously, well equipped with artillery, the Russians particularly as well, although theirs is not so mobile as the French. But make sure you use your artillery to hit those battalion masses and really drive the pain home. Now, the Austrians should really be advancing in line, to be honest. There's no particular reason, apart from the +1 staff rating, I suppose, to be in battalion mass. But, you know, it's up to the Austrian commander. Personally, I would probably go in line. Now I've thought about it a bit more than I had at the weekend. But, as is always the case with these things, battlefield conditions dictate the formation that would be best for you at any particular time. So that's it. It's gone slightly over 10 minutes, but that's okay, because I had to apologise for my sacking of the Grenzer at the beginning of the video. So thank you very much for listening. I will hope to get out Austrian Cavalry sometime this month. I'm also looking to do the final part of the Prussian Army, which should be out this month as well. I was hoping to get it out for Waterloo, but obviously that never happened. So hopefully that'll be out this month as well. Thank you very much for listening. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you like the content that I do here. I'm going to be pushing for 10,000 subs by the end of the year. So we're currently on 7,000. Thank you very much to all 7,000 of you. And I'm hoping that we can reach 10 by the end of the year. That would be absolutely awesome. But thank you very much for all of your support so far, and I shall see you guys in the next one.